We're live.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. On behalf of the Rye, Brook, and Port Chester League of Women Voters, I welcome you to our candidate forum on Rye City Council. I am Leah Dembitzer. I am a member of the Scarsdale League of Women Voters, and I am its immediate past president, and I'm serving as your moderator this evening. I'm pleased to be here with all of you. I want you to know I do not live in Rye. I live next door in Scarsdale, so I'm not familiar with the candidates or with the issues facing Rye. The League of Women Voters is a grassroots, volunteer, nonpartisan political organization whose mission is to help inform voters and encourage civic engagement. The League has been hosting candidate forums in communities and states across the country for many decades. We organize these forums so that voters have an opportunity to hear from the candidates on the local issues that affect their lives. The League hopes that this forum will help Rye voters make an informed choice at the polls. So I would just like to tell you tonight's program may be found on the League of Women Voters of Rye, Brook, and Port Chester website. Replays will be on our YouTube channel and of course on RCTV. Election Day is Tuesday, November 2nd at your regular polling locations from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. October 18th is the last day for the Board of Elections to receive absentee ballot applications. October 23rd through 31st is the early voting period. Please consult with the Board of Elections for locations for early voting. So I'm just going to go through the ground rules first before we begin. So the first of tonight's forums, there are two candidates vying for a vacated open seat that has 2 years remaining. The seat expires in December of 2023. The candidates who are joining us tonight are Jana Seitz and Josh Nathan. Welcome to both of you tonight. The speaking order of candidate opening statements was drawn from a hat by the host organization prior to the forum, and the order is as follows. Ms. Seitz will go first, and Mr. Nathan will go second in the opening statements. The closing statements will be in reverse order. Opening statements will be a maximum of 1.5 minutes. Following the opening statements, there is a question and answer portion with a total of approximately 10 questions. The questions were created by the Rye, Brook, Port Chester League, and were also solicited from the public before the event. Audience questions were vetted for relevancy to the office by a committee of the League. The candidates did not see the questions prior to the forum. The candidates will have a maximum of 1.5 minutes to respond to each question. After each candidate has had the chance to answer a given question, candidates will be given an opportunity for a brief rebuttal. The time limit for rebuttal is 30 seconds. Rebuttals are only for the topic at that time. Candidates may rebut a statement or position by their opponent or clarify their own answer, but not address a previous or other topic. Following the question and answer period, all candidates will give a closing statement for which the time limit is also 1.5 minutes. The timekeeper this evening is John Leonard. He will hold up a 30-second sign when there are 30 seconds of time remaining and a stop sign when it is time to stop. When the time is up, candidates may finish the sentence they have started. The timekeeper is visible on your screen. I will enforce the time limits. I would also like to emphasize that any response or statement that is a personal attack or of hostile nature will be considered out of order. So we will now begin with opening statements. Candidate Seitz, you have 1.5 minutes maximum to give your opening statement. You may go ahead.
Thank you, Leah. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining. Many thanks to the League of Women Voters and to my worthy opponent, Josh Nathan, for this opportunity. I came on board less than 3 months ago when asked to run for the remainder of a 4-year term on the council. I'm running because I believe it's time to put Rye first again. We've all been waylaid the past 19 months by COVID, politics, and important national social issues, and there's much work to be done. A seat on the council would be the culmination of my 14 years experience in Rye. I'm uniquely qualified, having served as president of the Friends of Reed, vice president of the Rye Free Reading Room, member of Christ Church Finance Committee, and co-founder of Paddle Adventure Camp at the Rye Nature Center, where I've led teenagers on local kayaking and hiking excursions for the past 6 summers. I've studied and explored Rye extensively. For fodder for a monthly column I write for the Rye Record, to better understand the habits of deer while on a city-appointed deer management committee, to figure out the best plan for playland while on a county-appointed advisory committee, and to better understand why Blind Brook can rage so violently. In short, I know Rye. We have many challenges to navigate, some of which we will discuss tonight, and I'm ready. I know how to listen and when to speak. I will fight for what is best for our fair city, to keep the integrity of her small town charm intact. I will learn what I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead, candidate Nathan. You have 1.5 minutes to give your opening statement. You may proceed.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Jenna. I want to thank the League of Women Voters, everyone watching, and my opponent. This is an important election. Before jumping in, I want to say again that my heart goes out to all who are dealing with the terrible impact of Hurricane Ida. So why do I want to serve you on our city council? I'm lucky for every day of the 20+ years I've lived in Rye. I'm committed to Rye for the long term, but passion alone is not enough. I will bring the hallmarks of my 3 terms as president of the Rye School Board and as an appointee to the Governor's Storm Planning Committee for Rye: fiscal discipline, good governance, and advocacy for Rye, particularly concerning flooding. Let me leave you all with one message tonight. Experience matters and results matter. While leading the Board of Ed, I started tax cap compliant budgets before there was a tax cap in New York. I successfully resolved the 3-year open contract with our teachers union. I successfully settled the decade-long multi-million-dollar tax litigation between the city, the schools, and the Osborne. On the Storm Committee, our team developed 18 flood mitigation and storm resilient projects. We brought Rye a $3 million federal grant to carry out several of those projects. I want to see them through and do more. Experience matters, results matter. I have the experience, I've delivered excellent results, and I will do so again for you. I will hit the ground running on the Rye City Council.
Thank you, candidate Nathan. All right, we will now move to our question section. This is our first question, and it goes first to candidate Nathan. Flooding. In your span of control in the role of a city council member, what steps would you take to accelerate the flood mitigation efforts in the area? You have 1.5 minutes.
Okay. So the first thing is we have to enact efforts to follow through on all 18 of those projects, and they can be defined as projects that are within Rye and projects that involve our neighboring communities. The things we can do in Rye, we should take action on right away. I would make flooding part of every council meeting agenda. Internal to Rye, I would incorporate water management, flooding, and storm resilience into all of our infrastructure planning, all of our discussions. We need to be engaged on this as a frontline matter and not let it get siloed or sidelined. It's easy to forget after a year or so, but these storms keep coming. With our neighboring communities, we need to work with them through the county, through the state, and through the feds to fund projects and coordinate projects that require more than what Rye is able to do on its own. So I would prioritize the 3 floodplains in Rye: the Blind Brook Plain, the one above the golf course, and the one along Midland Avenue. And those 18 projects are in our New York Rising report, a 155-page report, which I worked on with a team of 11 residents and in which the community engaged in. And we will follow those things through. But flooding must be a priority in every aspect of our city planning, our infrastructure work, and our engagement with other municipalities, county, state, and federal entities.
Thank you. Candidate Seitz. Flooding. In your span of control in the role of a city council member, what steps would you take to accelerate the flood mitigation efforts in its area? You have 1.5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I too would put it first and foremost on our agenda, and specifically the flooding in the one of the 3 Josh just mentioned, the Blind Brook watershed. It's a 13.6 square mile watershed that affects downtown Rye, our CBD, and our fire department, our nonprofits, the most violently. We've seen it again and again from 2007 when we had March 2nd and April 5th storms. seems to be always a double bang. Then to 2011 with Irene and Lee. And Sandy, of course, was a storm of a different nature, October 29th, 2012. And now Henry and Ida just packed a double wallop. We've learned over and over again that when the ground is saturated, if something comes along until it drains, we're in big trouble. And the silver lining of the New York Rising Commission findings, although they did not get done, I think the silver lining of that is that we have a plan in our hands. For certain, the upstream mitigation things are doable. They're within our reach. Upper and lower Bowman Dam, sluice gate monitors rather than sending a policeman out there every 45 minutes to check the levels. And we have to work across the borders within the city, within the state, the county, and feds, from the airport through SUNY Purchase and on down to Milton Harbor. It is within our ability to do it. I really think it is, although this was a strange water heavy storm.
Thank you. All right, is there any rebuttal? Yes, go ahead, candidate.
Just very briefly, the 18 projects did not get completed. That was not because of the committee. We did bring the $3 million grant to the mayor and the city council. The last administration did not accept the grant. The current administration did. So we lost valuable time. And I will say that's tragic. Nobody in Rye should be homeless in the wake of a hurricane. And it's one of the reasons, a primary reason why I'm running. I want to see those projects done, and I want to see us continue to do the thoughtful analysis that we did on that committee and bring it to the forefront of all our work on the city council.
Okay, thank you very much. Candidate Seitz, do you have a rebuttal too?
I think the difference in this one is that lives were lost, and that is going to be true, or our fear going forward. The loss of Ken and Fran Bailey was tragic and so unnecessary. That was not in our town, but it's right next door in Rye Brook, right upstream, less than a mile from where I live and where Indian Village is. And it's just got to stop. It's not just loss of property. It can be loss of life now. And I think we all see it very clearly. It's got to be our #1 priority.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to question 2. So this question first goes to candidate Seitz. Okay, the pandemic. What are your thoughts on how to restore the downtown Rye area and the small businesses that have suffered during the pandemic? You have 1.5 minutes. You may go ahead.
Thank you. Well, it's hard to imagine that now since Sandy, since Ida has come along and changed it all again. I feel that Rye on its feet improvised and did a great job during the pandemic. Personally, I think it was clever and creative and thinking out of the box, the way they turned downtown into a pedestrian center. I know some love it and some don't so much, and we just have to find a way forward to find a balance between, shoppers and diners and people driving through and the merchants. So I think some fun ideas like letting it be drivable through 6 p.m. and then turn into a plaza after that, something we could try. Again, I think that the stores have done a great job on their own being creative and getting back on their feet after COVID. And now it's really Ida that they need our help with, even more so. That again was a double whammy. You have to shop there, you have to go there, you have to support them. You have to shop Rye first, eat in Rye first, walk in Rye when possible. And again, our community shows that again and again. I think the responses by the city council were admirable, by the school, those responses were admirable. Churches, the entire community came together and did a gallant effort at curbing the virus. And I'm proud of how Rye rallied around it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, candidate Seitz. Okay, candidate Nathan, the same question, the pandemic. What are your thoughts on how to restore the downtown Rye area and the small businesses that have suffered during the pandemic? You have 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. Look, I think the question is very appropriate, but it does require that addendum that they're suffering not only from the devastation of the pandemic, but the new devastation of Ida. So it is that double whammy. But speaking to what we can do in the downtown, I think the way that the city came together and opened up the downtown and created the plaza, they hit the ground running, and that was good. I know there were some businesses that found it challenging because of the pandemic. And I think what's very important to do is, as we look at ideas of continuing with the plaza concept is working with our merchants. We now have the learnings of what did and didn't work in the past. Let's gather those learnings, let's get the data and see what we can do. We have a great history of partnering with our merchants. We were rushed with the pandemic. We now have the opportunity to do good work there again. I think the plaza idea is definitely something we should be pursuing. I think the way that Rye comes out and supports its local businesses, and that's part of the culture and fabric of our community. We're very fortunate for that, and those local campaigns are very helpful. And of course, the city council can play a leadership role in doing that and assisting with various regulations and things to help people, help those businesses recover and thrive again.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any rebuttal?
I would just like to add that I think it's amazing, and I think we should all take a minute and remember how fortunate we were in this town during lockdown to have so many green spaces. And it should really make us realize how much we need to fight for them, from the marshlands to Edith Reed, to our county park, to our town square, to our beaches. We were able to get out and about and still remain safe and, with a socially distanced. And I think we all need to remember that and be grateful.
Thank you. Any further rebuttal?
Let me just make one additional remark about the quality of what we were able to achieve. And that is, we allowed science and data to govern this. And we as a community respect the facts. And that's, I think, in large part why we were so successful, because we followed the best counsel. We opened the parks and people respected it. We are a sophisticated community. We can count on people to do the right thing if you give them the information and you point the way. And we did that in Rye. We should all be proud of that.
Thank you. Okay, now we're on to question number 3. And this first goes to candidate Nathan. What are your top priorities for Rye City outside of what we have covered so far? You have a minute and a half.
Okay. Well, my top priority is water management. I do want to speak to that because I want to make sure that we understand it comprehensively. And I'm just going to take it over to matters of zoning and building, in that we have to look at our zoning code and our building code in the context of how it impacts water management. The second priority beyond water management is we need to recognize what's going on in the world around us. We need to be a welcoming community with regard to race and gender. We can't pretend this is not an issue. And we can be very successful here. We have great intentions, and we can work with all aspects of our city government, our commissions, and all the people throughout Rye to make sure that everyone has the tools they need to be welcoming and be respectful, and to continue that process. We've started the work in our schools, we've started the work in our community, but the work isn't done. The third priority is fiscal responsibility, and that's a given, I think, for most candidates. But I've held the line on taxes for Rye before. I know how to do it. I'm facile with municipal budgets. I did that kind of work for Rye for 9 years. So when I talk about fiscal responsibility and working with budgets and holding the line on taxes, you've seen my work. I can do it. And then the fourth priority is good governance.
Thank you,
and
Josh.
we need to bring people together. I'm sorry, I didn't see the the little diagram.
Thank you very much. All right, candidate Seitz, let me repeat the question for you. What are your top priorities for Rye City outside of what we have covered so far? You have a minute and a half. You may go ahead.
Thank you. As we have covered flooding, and we all know that it's number one in our minds, our hearts, and our agendas, I think that probably the master plan, working on that, we hear a lot about that across the board. And we've not had one done since 1985. It's interesting, our population has remained the same at 1,600 since then, but we have over 1,000 more homes. Some interesting facts to me: upstream has changed, 450 homes built on Park Lake Preserve, 200 homes and a golf course built on Purchase Estate. Let's see, United was a hospital, Nursery Field was a field. We have no West Med, no St. Regis, no Ives, no phone towers to deal with, cell phones. I just think it's high time we take a look at this. We really should do this, look at it every 10 years with a vision towards 25. And who knows what's going to be around next gets around. We need a plan. I mean, there could be flying cars, and COVID really has changed the way that we live in this town, and we need to take a look at it. I think second priority for me personally is the incoming management of standard amusements at Rye Playland. They move in at the end of this year in December, and I'm personally invested in that, as I've been on the committee and on the board at Edith Reed and working with them for a very long time. And I agree, working good governance and working in a nonpartisan in a nonpartisan way. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so now, does anyone have a rebuttal to question number 3?
I'll just point out that when it comes to things like master planning, that is really what I'm talking about in terms of zoning and planning. And we did that on the Board of Ed. We created a narrative so the community could understand what our thinking was, what our objectives were for the schools. And we need to engage the community in the same way. Master planning needs to be a verb, not a noun. It's something that we're engaged in. It's an ongoing process. We're recording our thinking. It is a 30-year-old plan. So we need to think about it in terms of what Rye is like today and the issues we're facing today.
Okay, thank you very much. Candidate Seitz, did you want to rebut too, or?
No rebuttal, thank you.
No rebuttal, okay. Let's move on to question 4. It's for candidate Seitz. Fiscal policy. What is your position on where the city is financially? And what would you recommend going forward in terms of spending, budget, tax cap, new revenue sources, and other fiscal policy? And you have a minute and a half. You may go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I think the biggest kernel I've learned is the breakdown of our tax dollars: 60% going to the schools, 23% to the county, and 17% to the city. That has stuck with me. And obviously it's that wiggle room of 17% we've got to maximize to the best of our ability. We've got a lot of CapEx projects that are overdue, from the crumbling infrastructure to redoing Disbro salt shed and building 5 to updating the courthouse and the police station. And we need to figure out a way to do these concurrently so that we don't waste money, basically. I mean, our annual budget of 45 million, we should be able to figure this out. I think thinking outside of the box is absolutely the best. Parking meters is always thrown out as a potential revenue stream. If you just break it down to its simplest, our goal is just to keep our tax rate at or under inflation cost of living. Should not be a growth industry. And we just have to stay under our budget and definitely under the cap.
Thank you. Okay, candidate Nathan, I'll repeat the question. Fiscal policy. What is your position on where the city is financially, and what would you recommend going forward in terms of spending, budget, tax cap, new revenue sources, and other fiscal policy? And you have a minute and a half.
Thank you. Look, my understanding as an outsider to the current administration is that we are in a fiscally healthy position. It's important that we continue to build our capital reserves as we face significant high cost issues in Rye. It's something that we did when I was on the Board of Ed. We also need to look very closely at revenue sources outside of Rye. There's only so much the Rye taxpayer can be saddled with. The Rye taxpayer pays for things in our community through schools, county, supporting our nonprofits, our businesses. It's all coming from the same pocket. So we have to be very careful to make sure that when we're spending a dollar, we're not duplicating the efforts of other organizations. We're sharing services, we're coordinating, we're planning together, we can be working. We did this on the school board. We met regularly with the city to make sure that things that we were doing from an infrastructure and road standpoint were aligned with what the city was doing, that we weren't duplicating efforts. We should be doing that. We should definitely be looking at state and federal support and county support when it comes to dealing with flooding. That's got to be the #1 priority in our fiscal planning, is to make sure we can do internally what we need to do in Rye that's ours, and that externally we can get the support we need.
Thank you. Okay, is there any rebuttal for this question?
An addendum rather than a rebuttal, but I would like to say, although I'm not in finance, I did serve on the Christchurch Finance Committee for 2.5 terms, and I would get tickled. Why do you want me back? And they'd say, well, you see things that we don't. So I think being able to read into people's situations and not just see numbers on a spreadsheet is a really good quality. I also at Edith Reed have quadrupled our membership since I've begun on the board, and that has quadrupled our income. So I've learned a lot about that and where you can save and how to budget. So
Thank you. Any further rebuttal?
Just one other point of note is one of the things that is making taxes a further stressor is the cap on SALT deductions. And I do think it's incumbent on local municipalities to point out the harm that that is doing to them. We're no longer suffering the, our tax dollar is costing us more in Rye, and we've got to be sensitive to that. And I do think we have an obligation to be vocal about that as a municipality.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to question number 5, and it goes to candidate Nathan first. Capital projects. What do you consider the most important capital projects to be addressed with the city's infrastructure outside of flood-related projects? You have 1.5 minutes.
Well, I think that flood-related projects are the most important priority, and I would make that the overwhelming priority. I think that we have to look at our capital projects around DPW and other facilities in Rye, our roads, our storm sewer system, our regular sewer system, our electrical, our telecommunications, all with a lens around the issue of storm resilience. We have work that needs to be done at the harbor. We have work that's being done at Rye Golf Course. These projects are important projects, but we need to look at them through the lens and prioritize them with an eye towards what is going to make our community storm resilient, what is going to help with flood mitigation. So I don't think we should be separating those things out. And I think that if a project rises that's independent and infrastructure rises independent of water management, which leads to life and death crisis in Rye, we should be having that conversation with the community. I looked at the roads as I've walked around meeting people, and I see problems there, but I also see problems with the storm drain system. It's all got to be thought of together. Our communications systems in Rye, where you do and don't have cell service, that's a problem. In an emergency, that's a crisis, and it can be life or death. So I do tie that together around water management and flooding.
Thank you. Okay, candidate Seitz, I'll repeat the question. Capital projects. What do you consider the most important capital projects to be addressed with the city's infrastructure outside of flood-related projects? And you have 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. I mentioned it earlier, the Building 5 at Disbro, there's a plan to turning it into an emergency communications center. And given September 1st, I think that would be #1 on my list. There are training modules for natural disasters, and I think we should definitely look into those and be better prepared when the next storm comes, if it comes, because there was no one to answer the calls. They were overwhelmed. Roads, I understand how complicated that is. Some are county owned, some are city owned. You have Con Ed and Suez digging them up, putting them back together, and I just think a more open dialogue with the residents would be appreciated. Maybe even like a Instagram or a Facebook page like they have for everything else, so we can just all have our fingers on the pulse. I think that's important. And definitely it is all connected. I agree with Josh. Of the main ones, from the flooding and the cleaning out the gutters and the pipes and the catches, harbor dredge, to me, I'm very interested in that, and I would love to see that get done in my tenure.
Thank you. Okay, is there any rebuttal for this question?
No, I would just caution that there have been things on the capital list for years, and one of the things that we did on the Board of Ed was we made sure our capital project list was available to the public so they could see what was being done and what we were not doing and what we were reprioritizing. And sometimes when something isn't getting done, it's a failure, and sometimes it's not being attended to because the priorities have shifted, and we need to keep that dialogue going.
Thank you. Candidate Seitz, any other comment on the question before we move on?
No, I just think you just prioritize and you bump them off the list at each council meeting and you move it up a space. That's how we do it, Edith Reed. It's old school and things get done. You stay on them, stay on them, stay on them. You have a month and you get it done. So I think just focus and coming to completion on these things and working in a nonpartisan way will really be effective towards that goal.
Thank you. Okay, question number 6 starts with candidate Seitz. In April 2021, the Westchester County Board of Legislators reached a settlement agreement with Playland operators, Standard Amusements. What is your position about the future of Playland, and how do you plan on ensuring Rye will have a voice going forward? You have a minute and a half.
Well, thank you. As mentioned, that would be one of my dreams and hopes, to be involved as liaison on that and that happening. I've been on the board, advisory board appointed by the county to watch this whole process. And just in a nutshell, it's been going on forever. There was an RFP put out in 2010. Sustainable was chosen. It didn't pan out. Then Standard Amusements was chosen. They were given a contract in 2016. And they agreed on paying $25 to $35 million in capital improvements, and the county agreed to pay $35 million. Fast forward to 2018, and George Latimer was elected and canceled the contract, claiming breach. A lawsuit played out, and Standard Amusements in the end has been victorious. So they're moving in. I know all the players in this. I trust them. I have the master plan copies at my home. I show it to anyone who would like to see. They are very transparent in what their plans are. And there's a lot of falsities and rumor floating around out there. The land will never, ever be developed. It cannot. You'd have to go through Albany. It is state dedicated parkland. So you can just put that aside. There's no current plan for the pier, Charlie's Pier, to become a mega wedding venue. There's not even a plan made. So there are a lot of things out there that I would like to help clarify and have some open forum for people who are concerned, who are neighbors of Playland, to be able to get the facts, get them straight, and get them when they want them.
Thank you. Okay, candidate Nathan, I'll repeat the question for you. In April 2021, the Westchester County Board of Legislators reached a settlement agreement with Playland operators, Standard Amusements. What is your position about the future of Playland, and how do you plan on ensuring Rye will have a voice going forward? You have a minute and a half.
Thanks. I think it's important to understand the context of that settlement was driven by bankruptcy filing by Standard Amusement, and that really changed the dynamic of what the county was able to do because of the bankruptcy legal protections. And that's unfortunate, but that's where we are. The key with Playland is that we need to make sure that we have a seat at the table with Standard and with the county. And I don't just mean as an observer, as a neighbor that's inactive. Rye actually provides some shared services with respect to Playland. We coordinate with the county Department of Parks. We provide some first responder services. There's a whole jurisdictional component. So our seat at the table is not merely as an observer. We have every right to be there because our services are called on to assist. We have the opportunity to be very vocal as a community. We have a great relationship with our county executive. I have a great relationship with our county executive. It's something that I'm focused on. We're fortunate that he lives right there. And we have a lot of state and county folks living in the community. We need to leverage that. And so our seat at the table is very doable, and we can collaborate and work together on it. So that's what we've got to do. We've got to be active and vocal and hold them to their promise.
Thank you. Okay, is there any rebuttal on this question?
Yeah, just one brief correction. Actually, the Standard Amusements filed bankruptcy after their contract was declared null and void. It's a little flip in that, but that's for the fine print another day. Every one of us should be invested in this relationship, though, especially because the county has to date borrowed $130 million to pay for its portion of the capital improvements it promised and is contractually obligated to. And that's coming out of our pockets. So we all need to be invested in it and go forward and see the good.
Thank you very much. Okay, candidate Nathan, do you have anything else you'd like to say about this one topic before we move on?
No, I mean, I just wanted to shed light on the bankruptcy context because it wasn't sort of a natural sort of failure without that context.
Okay, thank you. All right, question 7. This goes to candidate Nathan first. Name one issue the council voted to approve this year that you agree or disagree with and why, and you have a minute and a half.
Well, the issue that I agree with is their agreeing and committing to raising the pride flag. And I thought that was absolutely 1,000% the right decision. I was troubled by how we got there. I appreciate that government can be a little messy, but that's been an issue before the community for a year. Children in Rye care deeply about the issue. There are many families in Rye that care deeply about the issue. I was glad to see that they followed through on that. I did write a letter in support of the action when it was being discussed and was pleased that everyone seemed to be supporting it. The key with that issue is it's not an economic one. It's a matter of everyone feeling at home in their hometown. No one should feel like an outsider here. And I think those kinds of values are critically important for us as a local government to stand up just the way the schools do and support those students and those families and make sure that everybody feels like this is their hometown. We had a tragic event after the Rye-Harrison game, just a great storybook day. And then one of our children was harassed because of that child's gender identity. And that's just inappropriate. And so this work needs to keep going. We can't simply say, well, we voted right and it's over. It's an ongoing commitment.
Okay, thank you, candidate Nathan. Candidate Seitz, name one issue the council voted to approve this year that you agree or disagree with and why, and you have a minute and a half.
Thank you. I think probably the one that sticks out is opting out in September of a marijuana dispensary on Purchase Street. We probably all know that New York has passed legalization of marijuana in 2021, but individual municipalities can opt out on-site pot shops and consumer, where you sit and smoke, the lounges. And we didn't know what opting in would really mean. It's not clear yet. There's much to learn, but we did know that you could have only this chance until December to opt out. And I think that it was a good decision. People ask about the potential tax revenue lost. And I just see it as a cost in public health and safety down the line would far outweigh any tax revenue that may come in from that. An ounce of prevention being a pound of cure. And I know there was heavy stuff going on for that. And I'm proud of us for making that decision at this point. And if that changes, when more light is shed on it, we have the option down the line to change our mind. So I think that probably is the one that I'm most in agreement with. Thank you.
Okay, is there any rebuttal for this particular question?
That's not a rebuttal. I think that was a great decision that the council made. We don't need to be at the forefront of that a particular movement. We don't know what the impact will be on communities that have it. And I was pleased to see that the students in Rye came out to the city council meeting and stood up and asked that we opt out, and they supported that decision. So I think it was an example of engagement, throughout the community, all ages, and really a testament to our kids who came out and said the right thing.
Thank you, candidate Nathan. Okay, candidate Seitz, any further comment before we move on?
No rebuttal.
Okay, great. All right, question 8 goes to candidate Seitz first. Development. Do you think there should be changes to the city's zoning code to deal with future commercial and residential development? How urgent is a new master plan? And should the city place a moratorium on subdivisions and tear downs pending its implementation? You have a minute and a half.
Thank you. Yes, I definitely think all of the above needs to happen and be reviewed. Overdevelopment, as I said earlier, we have an increase in houses and our population has stayed the same since the last master plan in 1985. Everywhere we walked, and Bill Henderson and I have walked in every neighborhood for the last 2.5 months, it's going on. They're huge houses swallowing appropriate neighborhood sized houses and impervious coverage everywhere, tree clearance. It just seems that the whole thing needs a review. And it seems piecemeal put together. And it just seems that perhaps zoning, planning, the Board of Architectural Review should meet with builders and developers and homeowners and realtors to come up with what works. And a compromise is going to have to be struck, of course. But I definitely think our town is crying out for revisions, and that would go hand in hand with the master plan, as I mentioned before. One little thing I just learned is that there's only one engineer used in the entire Rye new development for surface water control. And he or she is single-handedly directing and redirecting water across the whole city for each new build. I think that we need some help in there. I think we need to grow as our town has grown and changed. And again, open dialogue is imperative. But in short, the answer is yes to all three of your questions.
Thank you. Okay, candidate Nathan, I'll repeat the question. Development, do you think that there should be changes to the city's zoning code to deal with future commercial and residential development? How urgent is the new master plan? And should the city place a moratorium on subdivisions and tear downs pending its implementation? You have a minute and a half.
We do need to update our zoning and building code. I've been in Rye 21 years next month, and it's something that I've been hearing about the whole time I've been here. And as I've walked around, just as Jana has, and visited all the different neighborhoods in Rye, we see the results of what our current plan does and our current enforcement does. Something like 85% of zoning appeals get approved, and in other communities, it's only 15%. We need to look at why that's happening. We need to change the process as well as the code. We're siloed from zoning, planning, and the BAR in terms of community comment. So we almost divide and conquer ourselves in the way we engage with the public. So what I would look to do is not only look at what our code is saying, but also what is the data showing and how are we talking about this as a community? Things have changed since 1985. Climate change was, being discussed in academics. There was no internet. The socioeconomics of Rye were different. So we need a new strategy. When I was on the Board of Ed, we realized that our strategic thinking around education was 15 years old. So we rewrote it. We should be doing that, and we should be doing it in the context of flood and water management, because that has everyone's attention.
Thank you very much. Okay. Does anyone have a further 30-second comment or rebuttal for this question before we move on?
I do one quick thing. There's a house that was just built on Brookdale. Fascinates me. I'm from Louisiana and we flood all the time. And we have for years built up on stilts. You built above the flood line. There's a house, 5,000 square feet. He got 4 inches in and he had flood proofed it 4 feet. I'm sorry, 4 feet. He had flood proofed it 4 foot 8 inches. He came in, opened the door, the water flooded out. He hosed it out, and there's no damage. The mud room is made of fake wood. The mud room bench is concrete, and all the guts of the house are on the 2nd floor. It can be done.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay. Any further comment, candidate Nathan, on this issue before we move on?
Yeah, it can be done. And I think we also have to incorporate thinking about permeable land, understanding that dry wells are only a temporary solution when you have super saturated land. We have got to look at trees. The clear cutting of trees is taking away something that takes up water. One tree is 100 gallons of water a day. When you cut 12 trees out, your basement's going to flood. I mean, these things all need to be thought about. We need to be discussing it as a community at large as we rethink this, and we can do it. We absolutely can do it.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to question 9. Candidate Nathan, you go first. Which of the city's many commissions and committees are you most passionate about that you would lobby for city resources or policy changes? You have a minute and a half.
So I would absolutely like to liaison or work with and support the flood committee and make sure that it is an absolute priority. People working on that committee are very dedicated, and I worked with a number of them on the New York Rising Governor Storm Planning Committee here in Rye. So that would be my number one personal priority. The other one that relates very closely to that is planning, because again, I think these things are very much connected with each other, and we need to be introducing water management with planning, with BAR, with zoning, with everything that relates to how we build, develop, and protect Rye, or how we don't necessarily build and develop everything in Rye. So all of those need to be integrated. So planning, flooding, those are the priorities. I recognize that, you know, once a council comes together, there are different talents and expertise, and so I would certainly entertain working on another committee if that's where the need was, but that's my first and primary passion.
Thank you. Okay. So we're going to go to candidate Seitz. Which of the city's many commissions and committees are you most passionate about that you would lobby for city resources or policy changes? You have a minute and a half.
Thank you. I too, flooding, and that goes hand in hand. I agree with Josh, is planning. Too bad Josh and I couldn't work on that committee together. I think too, as a daughter of a developer, all my brothers are developers. It's the family business. I have a unique way of looking at it, not from a developer's point of view as much as perhaps my father does, but I've cut my teeth on it. I like being out there. I like hands-on. I like walking the dirt. I love the whole thing, and it would be fascinating to me. And I think it's really necessary to have a fresh look at that. Personally, I think my number 2 commission job would be liaison to Rye Free Reading Room. It's something I served on the board and vice president, and I loved when Rich Mecca would come in and check in with us. They have my heart. And thirdly, probably Rye TV. They have been homeless and wandering for a while, and they finally settled into the Rye Art Center, and I think they could use a liaison as well. So that would be my third choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any additional 30-second comment or rebuttal before we move on?
I don't think there's a rebuttal, but I will say that incorporated into the integration is the harbor as well. That's very much tied to water management and planning. So I would just add that clarification.
Okay. Candidate Seitz, any other 30-second comment before we move on?
I think the other one doesn't exist yet, but I think it will liaison to Playland and its standard amusements. And if that is created, I would most love to be on that committee and involved, having known the players and understanding the master plan, just to help that become as seamlessly transitional as possible.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move to closing statements. So this is reverse order from the opening statements. You each have a minute and a half. So we're going to go with candidate Nathan first for your closing.
Great. Thank you all for attending. You have an important decision to make. Everyone running is a volunteer and passionate, but there is a big difference: experience and results. I have the experience of serving this community on the school board 9 years, 3 terms as president. I delivered results: the teacher's contract, the Osborne settlement, tax cap budgeting before there was a cap, navigating the Great Recession for this community, good governance through listening to support one of our top-rated public school systems. On the Governor's Storm Planning Committee, we developed the 18 projects for storm resilience and flood mitigation. We brought Rye an initial $3 million grant from the feds, I'm intimately knowledgeable about those issues. I want to see them through and continue working on them. My priorities on the City Council: bringing Rye together rather than driving us apart through good governance, making flooding a priority. Every agenda should include it. It must be central to our infrastructure work. No one should be homeless after a storm. Ensuring responsible fiscal management, which you've seen me do. Working to ensure that we're a welcoming community when it comes to diversity and inclusion. No one should feel like an outsider in their hometown. I have the experience and the skills. I've delivered excellent results. I will do it again. I will hit the ground running. I just asked 3 things. 1, vote. 2, vote for me, Josh Nathan. And 3, once elected, reach out to me with your concerns, questions, and ideas. I look forward to representing you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, candidate Seitz, you have your closing for a minute and a half. You may go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh, for a lively discussion. Thanks to our viewers and to the League of Women Voters for its dedication to democracy. I moved here 14 years ago with my Rye native husband, Andy Seitz, and our 2 toddlers, both of whom attended Resurrection, then Rye middle and high schools. The special qualities of Rye were apparent immediately, and I jumped right in with a community of volunteers who helped keep it wonderful. I started Fall Fest at Edith Reed to help them recoup expenses sustained in a robbery. I met with all the nonprofits in town, the Chamber of Commerce, the merchants, the school groups, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, dance clubs, and glee clubs. I tracked down representatives from the city and the county, from DPW and Playland maintenance crew. And I single-handedly created an event that would shape the future of Edith Reed and eventually quadruple its membership. I built a community, and I will continue to do so if elected. I'm so grateful for this opportunity, as I firmly believe that to whom much is given, much is expected. Rye gives us all so much: a gorgeous city park and beaches, a lovely town green, Rye Nature Center, Edith Reed, marshlands, a marina, a recreation center, an art center, the oldest amusement park in America, plus top-notch schools, active volunteer organizations, a vibrant and safe downtown, easy access to airports, and a direct train line to the greatest city in the country. I'm ready to give back to Rye. The issues discussed tonight are ones we can certainly figure out through hard work, open dialogue, and fair compromise, something Rye has been doing since its inception in
Thank you, candidate Seitz. Thank you very much for your closing. All right. Thank you to the candidates. I appreciate it. That brings us to the end of candidate forum number 1. Thank you to Jana and Josh for participating. Jana Seitz and Josh Nathan are vying for the open vacated council seat with 2 years remaining. To everyone who watched, don't forget to vote. Also, we are going to be back at 8 o'clock after a short break for the second forum of the evening. And so stay tuned, and we'll see you again in a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.